When older adults can rekindle the passion for life, pursue new interests, and redefine their sense of purpose. Today, we will explore this concept, examine the factors driving this change, and analyze its impact on markets and merchants. For this, let me just take you to some of the familiar bylanes of our memory as I attempt to understand a phenomena that has transformed an entire generation, tuning them to the rhythm of modern living. Let me take you back to the 1990s, some 35 years ago, when I was about 23 and my father 52, just a bit younger than what I am today. The adults of his age then were seen as austere, cautious, and sacrificing. And that was largely due to the difficult times that they had lived through, such as wars, natural calamities, economic hardships, and that had instilled in them a sense of stoicism and reserve. They had survived the dark period of deprivation and therefore worked very hard to preserve all the resources to the lees. An entire generation of individuals, sans wants, was born. They were often prioritized the needs of their families and communities over their own, sacrificing their dreams and ambitions for the greater good. And women, in particular, were expected to bear an even heavier burden, quietly shelving their personal desires so that the aspirations in the family could take a center stage. An Urdu poet, Krishan Bihari Noor, has said it very nicely to capture these sacrifices. इतने हिस्सों में बट गया हूं मैं, मेरे हिस्से में कुछ बचा ही नहीं. Let me chart a parallel story of a young man fresh from college, and I got my first job. My family was overjoyed, but the celebrations were rather humble, as they show in the cinema of the 1990s. A visit to the temple, great food, lovingly prepared by my mom and sister, and a modest gathering of friends at home. That's it. No fanfare, just a soft glow of gratitude. Despite the financial stability, my father, he remained steadfast in his frugal ways of living, saving most of his earnings. My parents, they never dined at lavish restaurants. They did not go to the club for music. They did not indulge in adventure sports. Their pleasures were plain. Their vacations were limited to a few pilgrimages, and their life revolved around savings to build a house, weddings in the family, to plan for the health that might falter and for the twilight of retirement. But that was just not my story. That was about the middle class in India as I was growing up. Life lived with caution, guided by duty and tethered to restraint. And that brings us to the heart of our conversation, old as gold, the adult renaissance. This is about the liberation of a Gen X, people broadly in the age of 40 to 60, who are now as empowered as a youth in terms of living the life to the fullest. Gone are the days when youth was seen, or the Gen X was seen, passive, reserved, and bound by traditional expectations. More and more Gen X are breaking free from the stereotypes and embracing a life full of possibilities and opportunities. They are developing new skills, pursuing new passions, writing a new narrative of midlife. And no longer are they at the periphery of the economy. They're driving global finances and shaping the very culture of consumption. And let me illustrate this through some of my personal anecdotes. In 2022, about 3 years ago, I was invited to speak at the World Association of Newspapers in Spain. I had heard stories of Ibiza, the place of music and magic, and I had asked my wife if she could join me on this trip. While we were there, we stumbled upon a concert of David Guetta, the famous French DJ, that was happening near our hotel. At first, my wife was hesitant to join the concert as she felt this was meant more for the youth like her kids. But once inside, we were surprised to see many people like us and dressed to match the energy and vibe of Get Us music. The songs from that concert, Don't You Worry, I Am Titanium, they still fill me with the nostalgia and the excitement and desire to revisit that place. On another occasion, we were having coffee on the famous Champs-Élysées in Paris. Our daughter was studying design at Marangoni. And across the cafe, we saw a huge line outside the iconic store of Louis Vuitton. And once again, to our surprise, most of the people in the line were of our age and not the young, as one might expect to see shopping for the latest in fashion. As a small boy, I had seen the adults line up for wheat, sugar, and kerosene at the public distribution ration shops. And here I was, decades later, watching the Gen X patiently queue up for the designer handbags. My wife asked the waitress, "Is there a sale?" She smiled. "It's the new arrival, madame." The contrast was striking and unforgettable. You would have been to destination weddings all over the world. And last year, I attended a destination birthday of a friend who had turned 60. And he had booked the entire resort and turned it into a place of pure joy, music, laughter, and togetherness all around. Well, these glimpses from my personal life are a tribute to a generation that has truly moved on. They've realized the fleeting reality of life after having lost some of their loved ones in COVID. The Gen X is now straddling the full spectrum of living, carefully balancing family and friends, fasting and feasting, pilgrimages and parties, with an equal ease and enthusiasm. We are indulging in ways that were unthinkable once, taking vacations to exotic locations, dancing in Ibiza, and dining and dawning in Paris. This renaissance is not just embedded in my stories, it is written in statistics. As per the World Economic Forum report of 2021, the Gen X had spent the largest amount of money across any age group at an average of $84,000 per person per year, which is twice the amount spent by Gen Z at $42,000 for the same year. Back in September of 2014, an article of American Express stated that Gen X outpaces every other generation in terms of the spending power and controlling almost 31% of the total income in dollars. And now that phenomena has finally reached to us after its passage through the Western shores. And in India, a report of BCG of 2021 says that almost 65% of the 30 to 40 million new online shoppers are above the age of 35. Why are adults spending so much of money on themselves? And what are the drivers behind the shift in this behavior? Let us just briefly examine that part. You would recall that in 1990, the global GDP was about $23 trillion, and that skyrocketed to $111 trillion in 2024. The GDP per capita jumped from $4,300 to almost $14,000 in the same period. But beyond the rise in GDP of nations, there has been a landmark shift in social norms and family structures. And that has altered the mindset of a modern adult and thus his expenditure pattern. Modern families today are marked, I would say, by a sense of loving detachment. You love every member of the family and care deeply for their well-being. Yet, there is a healthy distance which has dissolved possessiveness and softened the need for control, and thus liberating everyone to grow in their own right. Joint families have given way to nuclear setups, giving greater autonomy to individuals financially and emotionally. It has resulted in fewer dependents and more disposable income. The relationship between parents and children has also evolved, and some detachment has led to an independence in choices, enabling parents to feel less guilty about spending money on themselves as they perceive to have fulfilled their duties towards their families. What is causing this detachment? I would say it is a rise in equality and empowerment amongst all members of the family, and a belief that now we have the capabilities to solve our problems ourselves. And what is leading to this empowerment? I would say it is the democratization of information, and information is power. And this, we all know, is the result of the internet revolution, which has not only accelerated the economic opportunities to all, but has flattened the family hierarchies. All in all, our families have created room for our hobbies. They love but not restrict. They embrace but not suffocate. We are replacing the previous norms of possessiveness and control with mutual space and independence to seek greater harmony and peace. And that is tough, but that's the effort by everyone at home. The rise in social media has also played a crucial role in this transformation. We are constantly flooded by images of people who are living their best lives on Instagram and other social platforms. And it is impossible for us to not get sucked into those pool of pictures. Their posts, they claim our attention, drive our desires to seek those gratification for ourselves. With the advances in healthcare and technology, people are living longer and enjoying better health and vitality in the later years, which has also given a new lease on life to the Gen X. We've seen that adults indeed are spending a lot of money on themselves. But what does it mean for marketers and merchants, which is the last part of my talk? Youth was always liberated, empowered, and a trendsetter in society. However, Gen X is now equally leading the way in food, fashion, fitness, music, and other cultural spheres. And in addition, Gen X are at the peak of their careers and wield an enormous spending power. I'm not sure whether old is gold, but old has a lot of gold. They always had it. May not be so much. But 30 years ago, old was not willing to part with that gold. But with a change in mindset, social freedom, rising independence in families, better health and income, old is now willing to give away that gold for their comfort and choices. And that is a gold mine for marketers and merchants who are already building familiarity, trust, and loyalty in their channels to impress the Gen X. Marketers were previously focused only on youth as a primary consumer segment, but youth is now becoming financially conservative and is seeking independence, which leaves a large part of the family corpus for the parents, positioning them as the emerging dominant consumer group. What are the areas of Gen X expenditure? Travel, healthcare, insurance, real estate, cars, entertainment, food, clothing, household goods, almost everything. It is hard to think of a category where Gen Z outspends Gen X, and perhaps even including dating. I want the new iPhone as much as my son wants it. To cater to this powerful group, the advertisers are reimagining their playbook and engaging celebrities in the age of 40s and 50s and beyond to create a direct appeal for Gen X. Look at George Clooney at 64 for Omega, Shah Rukh Khan at 59 for Tag Heuer, Beyonce at 43 for Tiffany, and Roger Federer for Uniqlo. We all know that advertising follows consumption, and there is a large part of consumption that is being driven by Gen X. And one morning, lounging in the tavern of my old habits and enjoying my morning cup of tea, the pages of a newspaper, they just opened like a stage curtain, and a beautiful ads of some luxury brands opened up. And I smiled to myself as the message was unmistakable that these campaigns were crafted for Gen X. People who have the power of purchasing and still have some fondness for newspapers. It is said that if you have money, modern marketers will find a way to take it away from you, and never so elegantly the way they do it today. Ladies and gentlemen, Gen X is rewriting the narrative of a rising silver economy. बाल सफेद हुए हैं, लेकिन हमारा खून नहीं. This was well said by an Urdu poet, Josh Malihabadi, to capture the untamed spirit of Gen X. And I have just quoted from his work. We are not just content with existing, we want to thrive, and the numbers show it. Something like an slogan, YOLO, you only live once, repeating in my head liberates me from within. Old is just not gold, it is glittering, glowing, and gloriously alive. Life is short, it has to be lived well. And this is what Gen X is telling the world through their wallets. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.